It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you just email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. The archives are free at Spreaker.com. I do a live show there every Friday night at 8 p.m. We play repeats there every single day. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content. And if you go there and look up our guest today, Matthew Richer, who's written a book about Kurt Cobain with Tom Grant, it is, I guess, right? Tom Grant. You could find our first show we did, and he's a returning guest now. And we're going to revisit this whole topic. I think he has a whole new point of view. I'm not going to put any words in his mouth, but he has a whole new reboot here. So, Matthew Richer, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Hey, remind the audience, who is Matthew Richer? But before we get into the whole thing about Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain, all that stuff, who is Matt Richer?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Jeez, I don't know. We don't have enough time for that.
It's the toughest question, right?
Yeah. Well, I am a writer, and I write, occasionally about various subjects, and occasionally I write about true crime as well. And years ago, Tom Grant asked me, and I live mostly on the East Coast. I have lived on the West Coast as well. I used to kind of, have one foot on both coasts, and I was living in California for a while, but I've moved back full time to the East Coast now. And let's see, many years ago, I think it was around 2011. I had written in the 90s, I think I was just out of college, I wrote about the death of Kurt Cobain because I found the story to be fascinating. I had, a little bit of conversation with Tom Grant during that time, but I also thought that the story was a fascinating story, but, I thought it could have been told better as well. I thought there was a lot to explore there that for some reason was not explored. And Tom contacted me in 2011. I dropped the subject completely and asked me if I wanted to write a book with him. So I was interested. And there was a lot of talk about the book for a while. Like, Tom is not the most efficient guy. He wanted to kind of talk about doing things, but not actually do it. And it kind of dragged on for a while. And, for a long time, it was just kind of conversation. But then we met up in Southern California, and I had a frame for the book. I didn't know a lot of his information, but I had done some research, and I had a model, which is actually largely the model I ended up writing, but for the book, and an outline, and we agreed upon this. But he said in this meeting in Santa Barbara, Goleta, actually, it's just north of Santa Barbara, he said, all right, we're not going to write this book. We're going to write, we're going to do 3 books. And I said, well, why would we do 3 books? It has to be a 3-book series. And this doesn't make any sense at all. Why would you do 3 books? I'm a big believer in having a model, like a business model for this. And you have to have a model of some kind if you're going to try to achieve anything. And I've never heard of anyone doing 3 books before and just self-publishing them. This is what he wanted to do. He really believed in it. 3
books at once? Throw them all out at the same time?
Yeah, more or less at the same time, like one right after another, and self-publish them.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a fruitless enterprise. Why would anyone want to do this, and what would it possibly achieve? But he believed in it completely. And he said, just help me write these 3 books. This, they'll be short. It won't take that much time. And then you can do whatever you want. You have my word. You can, he loves to talk like this, you have my word. He likes to talk about the power of his word. And he says, you can do whatever you want. You'll have complete control over it. And you can write the book that you just proposed. And I said, oh, geez, I don't know if I want to go along with this. but I said, okay, fine, and but I really thought it was a terrible idea. And so we went, and this 3-book series was called Murder Lake, Washington. And Tom is a very poor writer, but he thinks he's really good at it, and he really is actually terrible. I think he writes at about a 6th grade level, to be honest.
That's so fascinating, because so much of PI work is preparation, coming up with a plan, an advanced plan, and then report writing. It's all report writing that people can understand. I'm a paralegal too as well, so I'm writing motions too as well. It has to make sense.
Yeah, sure.
And keep people's attention.
Yeah. And the thing about Tom at this time, and he was living in Lone Poke, which is in Santa Barbara County, and I went to see him where he was living, and I don't know where he's living now, but at that time that I was working with him, he was living in Lone Poke, which is a military town outside of Vandenberg Air Force Base, and he was living his hard life. I mean, he was renting a room in a house owned by Indian immigrants in this town of Lone Poke, and he was just renting a room in their home, and that's where he was living. And he took me up and showed me the rented room in this family's home, and I don't know why he did that, but because he didn't have any evidence to show me. He just wanted to show me how he was living.
Really?
It was really weird.
Yeah, PI life is not as glamorous as Jim Rockford in a trailer in a parking lot of a restaurant. It's worse than that.
Well, he said he was retired at that time too. Okay, but generally, people retire when they can afford to retire. You don't retire when you have no money. You retire when you have the money. And he said he was, retired now, largely retired. And I was just kind of like, all right, this doesn't look like retirement really, but it was just, he was eating out of a microwave every night, washing his plate in the bathroom sink, and It was just, boy, this is rough. And I felt incredibly sorry for him. And that was my first mistake, or one of my first mistakes, because I think he took advantage of that. I did. I felt very badly for Tom. So I was like, all right, I'll help this guy, and I'll write this 3-book thing. And I went along with it, but it was terrible. And
well, Matthew, wasn't this like at the peak of his notoriety and online?
No, this is just before Soap and Bleach.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Tom has Tom is a notoriously difficult person to deal with. As you know, you tried to get him on your show, and you haven't gotten anywhere. And he has this kind of messianic Weltanschauung, this worldview. He believes that he's recapitulating the role of the Old Testament prophet Jonah, and the old Jonah in the Old Testament was called to go to Nineveh and tell them they had to repent or Nineveh will be overthrown. And he was called to deliver this message to them that, Nineveh, didn't want to hear. And Jonah didn't want to do it, and he runs away and, tries to sail to Spain and gets swallowed by the whale, and so on. And is forced to do the job that God called him to do. And so this idea that, he's called to tell this story about the death of Kurt Cobain, but he doesn't want to do it. He's reluctant to do it, but God has called him to do this. Wow. He very much thinks this. So it took me a while to figure this out, but so he has this kind of messianic Weltanschauung. He has this, there's a kind of one of the reasons why it's so difficult is because he has it gives him like a superiority that accompanies this. Like he is he's the anointed, and the rest of us are the unanointed. And he kind of, when he speaks to people, he kind of speaks down to people. People are beneath him. And
former police officer too, right?
No? Yeah, I guess so. I was never really able to confirm that.
Really? I was assuming.
I always assumed too. I think he was one for a time, but I was not able to really confirm that. Tom didn't like me fact-checking his story. He loved my fact-checking, but not fact-checking of him. So,
I tell you, I wish Hank Harrison was alive to hear this, man. Because I really wish, man.
Yeah. Well, and I think this messianism of his has manifested in a kind of Dunning-Kruger syndrome. Dunning-Kruger syndrome is when people with limited skills wildly overestimate their abilities.
That's me too.
And so he thinks he's a writer.
Yeah.
He thinks, and he's not. He thinks he's an investigator, but not really. He thinks he's a Christian counselor too. He was once advertising his Christian counseling services online for a while for free. That was after I stopped talking to him. I was kind of unnerved by that. It's not like you need training to be. I'm all for people doing ministerial work, but you need training for that kind of work. You can't just say, "Hey, I'm a Christian counselor. Contact me." You've got to go through some kind of program to learn that if you're called to it. And he's not done any of that. So that he thinks he's media savvy. He thinks he has a lot of skills he doesn't really possess. Now, when I began to look into the story, after this 3-book thing, that Murder at Lake Washington, that he self-published. Now, he was able to sell that to his supporters who bought that and make some short money. And, okay, it made a few $1,000s, I guess, but it's like, I really don't know. But I guess he got that out of it, but it didn't achieve anything. He thinks it did, but it did not. He thinks that this Murder at Lake Washington series intimidated Courtney Love into not making a movie about Kurt Cobain's life. He believes that. I think that is just not realistic at all. So, at any rate, I was, as I fact-check his story, he was difficult with that. The transparency was kind of always over the horizon with Tom, and I could not verify that he worked for the LA County Sheriff's Department. It was a long time ago. There were paper files back then. So it was, there could be an explanation behind that. He also claimed that he was a private investigator, and you know this, I know, from talking to you before. He was a private investigator hired by Paula Jones to investigate President Clinton.
Actually, what I heard was he was her bodyguard, is what I heard.
He was her bodyguard, that's correct. He was not the private investigator. He was hired, and I talked to Paula Jones' legal team, and I talked to Paula Jones herself, and I know you know Paula Jones. And so he was really just a bodyguard. Paula Jones was living in Southern California at the time of that case. And no, don't get me wrong, that's a pretty good assignment. That must have been kind of interesting to do that. But this idea that they came to Tom Grant to investigate the president, well, that's not really true. And of course, the investigation into President Clinton largely was not in California. It was largely in Arkansas. He had no license to be a private investigator in Arkansas. So things like that, there was always like, what's going on? I don't know how long he was a private investigator before he went to work for on the Cobain case. And one of the things that when I was researching the Cobain case, I kept looking into certain things like, Kurt Cobain, for example. The Seattle Police Department has claimed that there was in their reports, they make two claims about the greenhouse, and one of them is there was a stool wedged up against the door, barricading the door, preventing access, which is a very hard claim to sustain. And so I said to Tom, well, you know what? There was a fireman who gained access to the greenhouse and discovered the body. Well, why don't we find out, get the report from the fire department. I'll get the report. We'll talk to this fireman and figure out what he saw. And I did that. This fireman's name was John Fisk. No one had ever contacted this guy and asked him about if there was a stool there barricading access. This is 20 years after the death of Kurt Cobain.
Isn't that amazing? That kind of stuff is just so
amazing.
Fascinating.
Fascinating. Yeah. And I said, Tom, why? I thought you were up there investigating this death. Why why didn't you do that? You know what I mean? Like, this seems like a really obvious thing to do. Things like that.
Well, what about, I think even the last time you were on the show, or someone, I've done a couple of shows about this, the business about searching for the shotgun and not finding the shotgun. Was that... Or a room was searched and something was missing and was found the second search. Was it the shotgun?
No, there was a note found on the second search. Now, that's another question, but we should get into. But one of the things I realized, I asked some very obvious questions. Like, Tom later claimed that, I know he posted this on social media, that he actually talked to that fireman himself and investigated this. That's not true. That was me. I came to the conclusion, after I started looking into the most obvious questions about the death of Kurt Cobain, that Tom Grant never investigated the death of Kurt Cobain back in 1994. I don't know what he did, but the most basic questions about the death he did not explore, and he did not ask, and it did not occur to him. So I don't know what he did back in 1994. Now, one of the things he claims is that he only went to the house in the evening during a pouring rainstorm. And he didn't like this question, but I'm like, okay, yeah, you couldn't find him at night. It was raining. Why not just get up and go back to the house during the day? It seems like a really super obvious thing to do. Yeah. You can't find your wallet, right? Where is it? It's in the evening. You know what? I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to wake up and I'm going to look for it in daylight. Everybody does this.
Wait, but also too, he didn't know that the body had not been discovered yet. They were still searching for Kurt.
The body had not been discovered yet. Yeah.
Then why not put a camera on the door? Put a camera in the house. You stick it on a tree.
Why not put a camera in the house? Right. And I spoke to the Ernie Bart. There was a private investigator that was subcontracted, and he was hired to look at a drug dealer's house with which Kurt Cobain frequented. But
there you go.
Bart also went and started to put a camera on the house, and Tom called him off. So now Ernie Bart was very suspicious of that. He said, why would you not, if the man is missing and there is in danger, why would you not watch the house? It didn't make any sense. Now, I got to interrupt you again. I'm sorry, but back in those days, in the 90s, it was such a priority to put a camera on a surveillance, and it was such a chore because you had to go up and change the batteries, sometimes every 12 hours, okay? This was a huge chore, and to not have to take that effort, that was standard. Yeah. And so at any rate, one of the he claims he did not go to the house during the day, which I just thought, how could you not go to the house during the day? It didn't make any sense. He went to the house at night, climbed through the window. Okay, but you could have gotten the house keys from Courtney Love before you left L.A. and flown up there. Why not just grab the house keys and things like that? I just didn't understand. It didn't make sense. Well,
how old was he at that time? How old was he?
In his 40s.
And how long had he been doing investigations? Do we know?
How long had he been doing them?
Yeah, how long had he been an investigator at the time that Courtney Love hired him?
Doesn't sound like he was investigated for very long, like a year or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, it's not clear. I never got a clear answer from him on that. Mark Lanigan, in his book, the musician, the lead singer of the Screaming Trees, he wrote a book, came out 4 years ago. He's dead now, Lanigan. And he claims that this is in my book too, that he and Dylan Carlson and Mark Lanigan and Tom went searching for Kurt Cobain during the day. However, in Mark Lanigan's book, he says that they went to Kurt Cobain's house during the day. And they searched the house and the grounds of the house. Tom, Dylan Carlson, and Mark Lanigan. If that's the case, then they should have known about the greenhouse. But Tom never told me that. Okay, why you were in the house during the day and not telling us? Not telling me. So the thing about it is, it's kind of like if you're co-writing with someone a book, they've got to be, they've got to put everything out there. It's like a defense attorney. You can't defend your client if the client doesn't tell you everything.
Yeah.
Right. And if you don't tell me everything, and I was clear about this, then, something's going to come out and it's going to undermine the whole project. Well, of course, but he wasn't straight with me about a lot of things. And so the whole book project was basically doomed. And because of that. Now, one of the things I sent you was I had asked him so many questions in person, over the phone, about how he obtained a copy of the suicide note from Kurt Cobain. That whole day, I wrote it out with great drama, but I always knew that Tom was hiding something from me. And I asked him so many questions about it. And it turns out he had, the day he got the note, whatever the day that was, he called Sheila Lowe, who was a document examiner. He called her 1 a.m, got her out of bed, and asked her to examine the suicide note. Now, this is a story I was never told. It's not something you would forget. And she did it in the middle of the night. She examined the suicide note and some other documents that he had sent her, and then concluded that Kurt Cobain had written the entire note. Now, when Sheila Lowe sent Tom a bill for this, he refused to pay. He didn't pay her. He refused to pay her. Now, I don't know if you got a chance to look at that, what I sent you. So I was never told this story. And it doesn't make, if he was hired by Courtney Love to find Kurt Cobain, investigate the death, why didn't he just take these bills and submit them to Courtney Love and have them paid?
Yeah, right. Was he still on good terms with Courtney Love at that time? Of course he was, right? It wasn't until months later.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Was he getting paid otherwise by Love? Was his payments coming in regularly with Love, or was he dunning her with letters and fees? Do we know?
We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something I don't know. So these are the kind of things Tom concealed from me. Well, it dooms the book, and so it dooms all of it, really. And he didn't share this with Ben Statler and with Soaked in Bleach either. Ben Statler had no idea about this. So, for example, now with Soaked in Bleach, I did go down to L.A. and meet with Statler and some of the staff on, and I know you've had some of the critics of Soaked in Bleach, some of the participants in Soaked in Bleach on your show. And I did meet with the people at Soaked in Bleach, and that's one point where things really changed, because I had shared a lot of information with Tom that he could use for Soaked in Bleach, and the agreement was, such as the fireman John Fisk gaining access to the greenhouse. Now, the agreement was, the understanding, I should say, was that, okay, I'll share this information. I'm not going to get paid for it. Tom got paid $50,000 initially for Soaked in Bleach, and then he got paid some more money after that. Mm-hmm. I didn't get paid anything, but I was okay with that. I was focused on the book, and but I did want credit for my research. I did want that, and I was told I would get that. I did not. So I suspect that Tom blamed Ben Statler for this, but I think Tom actually took the credit for it himself. And because he's taking credit for it in other venues and social media. He's posted on this. So I stopped sharing things with Soaked in Bleach at this meeting, and I said, okay, I needed more information. That would be really interesting, but I stopped it. I said, oh, they're not going to give me credit for this. And when I went to that meeting at Soaked in Bleach, it was obvious that they really didn't know what they were doing. I mean, it was 100%. I thought the film was going to be actually much worse. And it was just really remarkable. Like, for example, Norm Stamper is a big character in that film. And I thought this was, again, a very obvious thing to do. Okay, who was the police chief at the time Kurt Cobain was killed? Oh, Norm Stamper. Norm Stamper has a book. Okay, let's read the book. So I did that, and I said, Stamper was very critical of the lead detective of the Kurt Cobain's homicide investigation, a guy named Donald Cameron, he was very critical of him in his book, really critical. And I said, oh boy, this is pretty useful. And so I said, Tom, do you know that this guy, this police chief at the time, is really, goes after this guy Cameron? So at any rate, and that was why Stamper ended up being a character in Soaked in Bleach. So things like that. But like when I went down there and talked to him, I said, Stamper has his book, and there was another expert in the film named I indirectly chose several of the experts for Soaked in Bleach, and one of the experts is Vernon Geberth.
And you got no compensation for any of this?
No compensation, no credit either.
Did you have to sign any kind of NDAs? Or I promise not to disclose nothing?
No.
Okay.
No. And I was way too trusting.
Which is even more unusual, because usually they have you sign something saying, well, we own everything you tell us.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Vernon Geberth has several articles on how to properly investigate an apparent suicide. He has a book, Practical Homicide Investigation. I read it all. I interviewed Geberth over the phone. We had some really great conversations. But, when I talked to them at the film, did you get Stamper's book? Did you read it? No. Did you read, what did you think of Geberth's book? Oh, we don't have it. Okay. Are you going to get it? No. They just, they weren't doing any homework on anything. Tom told me they had a whole team of fact checkers in the film. I found out they didn't have any.
Matthew, is there any chance that perhaps an interested party in all this was funneling money and backing all this, someone who wanted to cover things up?
I don't know. People have asked me that question. I have no idea. But it was like, did they want to fail? Like, how do you not have a fact checker? I mean, this doesn't make any sense at all. But they didn't. They didn't hire one for the film. And Tom knew better. I don't know about Ben Statler, but Tom knew better than that. And so it was just a disaster. Now, here's the interesting thing. I was really ready to walk away from the whole thing. I was like, all right, I tried writing this book. This is a really interesting story, but, I give up. I was really ready to give up. I had really one foot out the door. 2014, a woman named Kathleen O'Toole becomes the police chief in Seattle. Now, Kathleen O'Toole is something of a friend of the family. I have, plenty in common with her. I grew up in a family where everyone in the family, it was kind of went to Boston College. It was just kind of something you knew when you grew up that you would end up going there. And she went to Boston College as I did, and she was head of the Alumni Association, I believe, for a while. And she was also police chief in Boston. Now, so I come from a big Boston College family, so she knows a lot of my I've met her before and knows a lot of my relatives. And another organization she's very involved in is the American Ireland Fund. Now, the thing about people from the Northeast and especially from the Boston areas, a lot of people have parents or grandparents that came from Ireland, as I do, and even have dual citizenship, as I do. Like my wife, my children, and we all have Irish citizenship, and Kathleen O'Toole does as well. And she actually served as the head of the National Police Force in Ireland for a while. So there's this kind of culture of people who have Americans who have like one foot in Ireland, and Kathleen O'Toole is one of them, as am I. Now, for example, my mother and her siblings went to Ireland and took a trip across Ireland with Kathleen O'Toole once, and Kathleen O'Toole's daughter. So, I mean, real close connection to the Seattle police chief. So this happens, and it's a gift. I thought, oh boy, I could write this book and I could hand it right to the Seattle police chief.
Let me correct. You said she was the Boston police chief, but she was also Seattle police chief?
Yeah, and then she later became the Seattle police chief. Yeah, and that in 2014. So now here's the interesting thing. I find out afterwards that I tell Tom this. Tom isn't interested. Like, are you kidding me? This is a gift. He didn't think it was a big deal. Like, he trying to downplay it. I was like, okay, this is weird. Now, Ben Statler, this is hard to believe, but it's true. It's very easy to verify. Ben Statler's father is the part owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And
parts, not
the majority
part.
of yeah, correct. Yeah,
that's what he audience.
That's right. I get all that. Yeah, but And the majority owners of the Pittsburgh sales are the Rooney family out of Pittsburgh. Now, I've known the Rooneys are a large extended clan. I've met many of them. I went to college with a couple of them. And so they're also very involved with the American Island Fund. They're a very Irish family. Dan Rooney was the ambassador to Ireland under President Obama. He knows Kathleen O'Toole very well. Now, I said, and I told this to Tom, and Tom didn't really want me talking to Ben Statler very much. He said, I said, Tom, we have the book. We have this project. We can get this to the Seattle Police Chief. And you also have this film. You could get this film to the Seattle Police Chief as well, because, Ben Statler could just ask Dan Rooney or another member, or Tim Rooney or one of the Rooneys to contact Kathleen O'Toole and say, hey, could you give this film a look? And so you had two really effective angles to get to the Seattle Police Chief with the story of Kurt Cobain's death, the problems with it, and perhaps getting another look at it. He didn't want us to go with either angle. He thought, no, we're not going to do that. Ben's going to write her a letter. What? Why? Why would you write a letter? And he did. He wrote a letter, and he posted on his website, thought it was, great move. And I just thought, this is just this. What's going on?
Wait, did he mail the letter or just post it to the website?
Yeah, he just mailed it. He mailed the letter and he posted it to his website. But why would you go this route? You have a much more effective route that you could never turn down.
Or at least both, yeah.
Yeah. And I
follow up with a letter.
Yeah. So I sent her, Tom knows this. I sent her an email to her Seattle Police Chief. She replied. Signed it Kathy, said she would take a look at my book. And then I said, so after I finally wrote it, and it was a ton of work, the book. It really was. I wrote every word. It was a ton of work. And I really labored over it, especially over the wording. And and people loved it. I posted it first on Amazon.
Yeah, I was going to say, great reviews, 4.5 reviews out of 273 reviews.
Everyone loved it.
No complaints.
Great, all that. Yeah, and so, and the goal, people used to do this at that time, this is several years ago, was, you publish the Kindle on Amazon, you get some reviews, and then another publisher picks it up. And I got a guy, I was interviewed by a show named called Crime Beat with Ron Chapesiak. And
sure.
Yeah, he recommended this publisher, Wild Blue Press, that does true crime books.
Sure.
And he said he writes for them. He says, I'd never heard of them. He said, contact them, do this, do that. I'll contact them for you, and you can and tell them that they should publish a book because I really liked it. So so that Amazon led to that deal, but it didn't last very long because Tom contacted Wild Blue Press, a couple of weeks later, and threatened to sue them over the book. It was really weird. I mean, Tom had no ability to sue anyone, and he had given me his word that I had full control of the book. It's true. He wanted a book deal with a bunch of money, like Silk and Bleach gave him $50,000 up front. He thought he was going to get some book deal with a big advance. Well, that's very hard to obtain.
Yeah, especially from Wild Blue Press. Definitely not.
Yeah, right.
They don't have it. Yeah.
Right. They don't have it. Most books are very slow to pay out.
Yes.
I was okay with that. There was all kinds of time to try to, but, Tom's broke, and, he has prescriptions, and he needs, he has to, and so, he just got in the middle of the whole thing. And, hey, what about, giving me a word that I had total control of this? And what about the fact that I could take this book and I could give it to the Seattle Police Chief, and, maybe nothing would have happened, but, there was a window there. There was an opportunity. They would have had to give it a look. It would have been something. Now, the way I left it with Kathleen O'Toole was, all right, you get the book published, and it can. We'll take a look at it, but can't promise anything. Well, naturally, they couldn't promise anything. They could never make more of a promise than that. But Tom just sabotaged it. Not only that, as I was, trying to get the book ready to put it just on Amazon, I kept asking for photographs. He said, oh, yeah. Never sent me any. I was getting this passive-aggressive behavior. And I finally realized, I said, after we had this disagreement over the Wild Blue Press public publishing deal, I finally said, forget it. I'm throwing in the towel. I give up. I'm walking away. And I pulled the book off of Amazon, and I said, I just give up. I was just so fatigued by the whole thing. And I called the Seattle Police Department and I said, I'm sorry, I'm walking away from this whole thing. Thank you for your time, but I'm moving on. I give up. And I realized something, and it's this: he doesn't want to win. Like, he claims he wants justice and things like that. I don't think he does. And I tell this story to people. When I was in prep school, I played football, and there was a kid on the team who used to always talk about what he wanted to do when he got on the field. He said, if only coach would give him the opportunity, I'd show him, I'd score a touchdown, or I'd get a first down, or I'd do this, or I'd do that. He was always talking big about what would happen if only he got the opportunity to perform on the field. And then one day the coach turned to this kid and said, "Hey, you, out on the field." And that kid said, "Oh, sorry, I can't, coach. I pulled my hamstring in warm-ups." And the reason this kid did that, and we all knew, was because, if he got out in the field, he wasn't going to be able to deliver. He wasn't going to be able to perform. And something like that is going on. Tom does not want to win. That's what I believe. He gets in the way of too many things. And I don't know what he wants, but he doesn't want to win. The idea that he wants to get justice and bring this case to court or bring this case to official investigation, I don't believe it. I don't know what his motives are. I really don't.
Well, let's imagine. Let me ask you a couple questions. Have you spoken to the Courtney Love side of this, her attorneys, her people?
Not much, but a little bit. I can't remember his name now. One attorney I spoke to in Los Angeles. I spoke to Danny Goldberg's personal assistant. But I did try, but I didn't really get anywhere.
Now, Tom Grant, he was hired by Courtney Love. How much was he paid from her publicly in total?
I don't know. He never showed me any of that stuff. Now, in the police reports, Tom told this story, and Tom tells the story that she called him and found his name from this is a colorful story that I start my book out with, that about Tom receiving a phone call on Easter Sunday from Courtney Love, and she found his name in the Yellow Pages. I don't think I believe that story anymore. In the police reports, it makes reference to Courtney Love's attorneys hiring Tom Grant.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So I'm not sure what the consistency. He said that was an error, but or an oversight, but I don't know that it was. Now, in the Sheila Lowe documents, the ones I sent you, in the letters they exchanged back and forth, he's really terrible, treats her terribly. I mean, he owed this woman money and for the contract, and he refused to pay it, and for the handwriting analysis. But he says, my business is really suffering right now, and I'm waiting. I have to put an ad in the Yellow Pages in order to get clients, and I haven't been able to do that yet. I'm still waiting for the Yellow Pages to come out so I can get my ad in there. Okay, well, if that's true, I thought Courtney found you in the Yellow Pages, but here you are months later saying you're waiting to get an ad in the Yellow Pages. So what's going on?
Yeah, because people keep the last year's Yellow. Back in those days, people would keep. They would have like 5 or 6 years of Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you're not searching for the newest one. Yeah.
So I'm waiting for the new one to come out so I can get
kids
business.
Kids don't even know what Yellow Pages is. Yeah.
So at any rate, I just don't know what was going on. He claimed that he told the story he told me about Sheila Lowe. He told me, don't contact that handwriting analysis. We had this bad falling out because she did a poor analysis of the note found on the stairs, which is sometimes referred to as the Cali note. There was when Tom and Dylan were searching the house, they found a note on the stairs, and he had that note analyzed by Sheila Lowe, and that Sheila Lowe said that the note was written by a woman with a strong personality or something like that. I never saw the analysis. He never showed it to me. And he said when he reported that analysis to the Seattle Police Department, it undermined his credibility with them. This is the story he told me. Well, that's not really the story. He didn't want me to call and find out that he had paid the woman, and he didn't want me to find out that that she had said that the suicide note was written by Kurt Cobain.
Right.
So he didn't want me talking to the woman. That's why I came up with this whole story. There is no evidence that the Seattle police were ever interested in the note on the stairs at all. They ruled the death a suicide the day the body was discovered. They weren't interested in the notes. And the death certificate was signed the next day. I mean, they ruled it at the scene of a suicide. So the idea that his credibility was undermined by Sheila Lowe's analysis, that's not true. And there was a second handwriting expert too, a woman named Ray Lyon. He didn't pay her either. So I don't know why those bills weren't just submitted to Courtney Love and her attorneys, which they would have been paid right away. Yeah. Why was he doing this? So he was doing this without telling them, Courtney Love and her attorneys. But why? Well, this has not been explained. I don't have an answer. So it's just a little, there are just a lot of wrinkles in the story. So many wrinkles that it's become wizened. And you can have a wrinkle in a story here and there. That's inevitable. And you can cut people some slack for that. But there are just so many in the story. I don't know what happened back in 1994, but I don't know what to believe anymore.
Gotcha. At this point, you feel Tom Grant's unreliable. Now, but what about people like Cyril Wecht who says, hey, it's impossible. You took this dope. You couldn't shoot yourself. What about that stuff?
Well, I had the autopsy report, and I spoke to Cyril Wecht about the autopsy report. And the autopsy report was obtained. I got my hands on it months ago. And
what's the chain of custody? And how do we know that thing? Who leaked that? Do you know? Do you know or do you not know how it got leaked?
I'm not entirely sure how it got leaked.
Okay.
But it got into my hands, and not too many people knew about it. And I had a few experts look at it, and it's a really poor. And I sent you the autopsy. It's a very poor autopsy report. It's really just really amateur, and it doesn't contain a lot of great information. I had a couple of reputable MEs look at it and say, I can't, overturn a suicide verdict based on this report. It just doesn't have enough. There's just not enough meat on the bone. Wecht thought that there was evidence of a pulmonary edema. So meaning the lungs had filled up with fluid. And therefore, if the lungs were filled with fluid, then that means he could not have shot himself. The lungs wouldn't fill up with fluid after a gunshot. They would fill up after an overdose. So, maybe it's not really spelled out on the autopsy report. Now, the interesting thing about the autopsy report is, makes it very difficult for the Seattle Police Department to explain, is the hands were not bagged. The hands should have been bagged and then tested to see if he had fired a weapon. They were not bagged at all. The arms should have been measured. They were not measured.
The clothes weren't tested either for a gunshot?
No, nothing. None of those tests were done.
Huh.
And they ruled it a suicide at the scene. And one of the interesting things about the autopsy, for me, probably the most interesting thing was that he had food in his stomach, some meat and vegetables. Now, it takes about 2 hours for the stomach to expel the food to the intestines. So that means he died within about 2 hours of having a meal. Mm. And so one medical examiner I spoke to said, he's done a lot of suicides, and especially suicides where someone is high on drugs. There's plenty of those. And he said the drug level the heroin did not surprise him that much. But he did say, I had one experienced medical examiner tell me, he said, I've never seen anyone commit suicide on a full stomach before. It's not logically impossible, but it is, generally,
Yeah, just imagine the torment you're going through before going through a suicide. You're not thinking about eating. That's the last thing
you're not thinking about eating. Oh, yeah, I'm dying to kill myself. I'm going to sit down and have some meat and veggies.
You would have no appetite, yeah.
You would have no appetite, yeah. So, and now if we indulge the Seattle Police Department's theory for a moment, the suicide note, if one writes a suicide note very shortly before death, usually one writes it pretty soon, right before the act, one would think. He writes it on the back of an IHOP menu. That's what it was written on. Mm. So, okay, did he go to an IHOP right before he died? That because he ate right before he died. So he would have gone to, so one stands to reason then, according to the police's theory, that he must have eaten at an IHOP. So he eats at an IHOP, writes a suicide note, goes home, goes up to the greenhouse above his garage, sits in the middle of the floor, smokes several cigarettes, takes a very, very, very large dose of heroin, and then inserts a shotgun into his mouth and pulls the trigger. That's not an easy theory to sustain. But so the autopsy report does point to photos. Does point to problems with the story. If we had the photos, for example, of the crime scene, more of them, we could, they may indicate that there was very little blood at the scene, and that also may indicate a post-mortem gunshot wound. I don't know. It's hard to say. But the autopsy report doesn't really support murder, but it doesn't really overturn the suicide verdict either. Not quite, at least in my opinion. So at any rate, that's where we are. Now, I am of the opinion now that there are so many errors made over the years with the Cobain case that the Seattle police will never reopen the investigation. I don't buy it. I really don't. I think it's been so botched and so screwed up so many times. If I were to rewrite the book, I told someone the other day this.
You should rewrite the book. I think you should write another book. And I'm serious, man.
Well, if I were to rewrite it, Errol Morris has a good book about the Jeffrey McDonald case and Fort Bragg, 50-something years ago, the Fort Bragg murders 50-something years ago. And the title he uses is A Wilderness of Error. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? That would be a good title for the Cobain case. It is a wilderness of error. It really is. There's so many errors by so many people. The press, the medical examiner, the police, the investigators, the victim, the killers. I can't believe how many errors have been made over the years, and not just at that time. And I tried my best to tame that wilderness. I tried my best to run order through it, and I threw in the towel. I just said, I can't do it anymore. And that's what it is. It'd be very, very difficult to undo those errors. There've just been so many. They just keep, every time there's an advance, there's one step forward, like Soaked in Bleach is a film. It was one step forward and 10 steps backwards. It always goes like that with this story. All the problems came out about the witnesses and having their testimony tampered and things like that and misrepresented. It's so the film is, it's a real belly flop of a film in so many ways. But it did raise some questions though, and it did bring the story to the attention of a lot of people who otherwise had not known. But it also set as a goal. It also set the goal backwards because for some reason they manipulated the testimony of certain people and made it appear that they held opinions that they didn't really have.
What do we know about the falling out between Love and Grant? It's a big deal for a PI to turn against this client and start publicly accusing him of murder.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen every day.
I don't know. I'll tell you what, though. I know some of the recordings I don't know the extent of it because, how would I know? It's only Tom can answer the question. Some of those recordings have been destroyed and manipulated. So the most damaging one is the one that he recorded in January of 1995 when she was from New Zealand. And she talks about how Sergeant Cameron came to her house and told her to destroy the Rome note, which is a note Kurt Cobain left her after he overdosed in Rome in March of 94. Now, there's recordings where Tom kind of confronts her over things, and they're very compelling. They are, but most of that recording was destroyed. And why, I don't know. I assume he told me it was because Courtney Love was tearing up during the recordings, and he thought that those tears would compel people.
Oh, so Tom destroyed the recording.
Tom destroyed it, yeah. Now, the reason why he destroyed it, I believe, is because there were things on those recordings that he didn't want people to hear. Just like he didn't want me to look into the Sheila Lowe incident, for example. And so I don't know what happened between them. I think he probably wanted money, and he didn't get it. I think that had something to do with it. I do think he has good motives, too. I do think he thinks a wrong was done that he wants to right. I think that's part of it. But I think, he had a falling out with Ben Statler, big one, because he wanted money from Ben Statler. He was very open to me about trying to get, $100,000 more for Soaked in Bleach 2, which I think has gone nowhere. Tom was very upset with the fact that other people worked on Soaked in Bleach made more money than him. He was very, 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 felt very wronged by that. I didn't make anything off Soaked in Bleach. I was okay with it, but he felt really wronged by that, and he wanted more money in the sequel, and the sequel never happened. And he and Statler no longer speak.
So I know when you and I spoke before the show, I know you did at least one previous interview before this. I don't know how many others, but what has Tom's reaction been since your new tour here of what we call it, the Unplugged tour, the Unplugged tour?
I apologize. I don't know what his reaction is. I have no idea.
You haven't heard from him?
No. I apologize for writing the book for I gave Tom a credibility that he didn't really have, and I apologize for writing the book. I portrayed him as a man of integrity and a man of ability when it came to investigation. And because that's what I believed or wanted to believe when I first started writing it. But by the time I was done writing it, I didn't really believe it anymore. It's like as I was writing the book, I had like this counter narrative developing in my head, like, oh boy, what am I doing here? Is this all false? Like I had two books at the same time as I was writing it. It was very stressful, and I apologize for writing it. I made him out to be a man of ability and integrity, and that's obviously not true. And I apologize to people for my part in it. That's why I want to unplug the book. I had unpublished the book entirely, but I was told by people that Tom was planning to put up his own version of the Kindle. So I had to put it back up there, but I do nothing to promote it. So it's there. I don't think anyone really buys it anymore, but I don't want him putting his own version.
I played the repeat. I just played the repeat that had the title of the they got a huge response, man. People that had never heard about the book were emailing me the other day. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So who gets that money now? Because when sales
there is no money. It doesn't. No one really buys it. Now Hank Harrison read the book. He loved it, and he thought that my section on Courtney Love, he said, was spot on. I had a long biographical section on her. He thought, you nailed it. He really liked it. And so my contributions to the book, my research, I haven't read it in years, but I mean, my research and my writing, and there are whole sections of the book that Tom has nothing to do with. I stand by that. But Tom's, the things that Tom claims he saw and did with his own eyes, I can't stand by that. I really don't know how true it is. I really don't.
Matthew Richer, I can't thank you enough, man. Okay, we're out of time. We've been out of time for a little while. We have to cut some commercials.
Oh, we have.
Okay. But
no worries.
Great stuff, man. I want you to keep in touch with me, though, and as things progress here, because this is going to bubble up, you're going to get a lot of response from this. Keep me informed of what's going on here, man. We'll have you come back. The fascinating story here. And I'm going to be talking about this guy's Friday night. I may not play this show. I may play the show before Friday night. But about similarities between the Epstein investigation and other things, even the JFK assassination, where they and even Jeff McDonald was involved with that a bit too, with the kind of like how the official story is kind of manipulated, out there by forces with interests, certain self-interests. Matthew Ricker, thank you so much. Nothing to plug. What about your Facebook? People can follow you on Facebook. That's about it, right?
People can find me on Facebook, correct. Yes.
And any new books planned?
Nope, nothing planned. I'm not writing anything about the Kurt Cobain case at all. No articles, no books, no nothing.
Man, I could not encourage you enough to write. I'm really serious, man. To get the record,
that a lot.
It's so important to get the record straight, you know?
Yeah, I know.
You could die tomorrow and go down in history as the guy who wrote the book about, it's true,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, God forbid you die tomorrow. Okay, my friend. But thank you so much, Matthew Ricker.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.